This is an Imaginites audio presentation. Extraterrestrial Interference with Shay. This Imaginites presentation is copyright 2003 to Imaginites. Numerous audiobook titles, as well as motion pictures, soundtracks and film and music production utilities are available from the Imaginites website at www.imaginites.com, or you can contact Imaginites at Australia 618-9324-4455, or by emailing Imaginites at the following address: mail@imaginites.com.
Okay, hello. We're here today to talk to Shay, who's got some interesting aspects of life to talk to us about.
Okay, like most people, I had some childhood issues I needed to deal with and stuff. Wasn't finding much of a solution through the New Age area. I went into the New Age area for 5 or 6 years to try and find something to clear mostly negative mind chatter, that continual thinking about stuff that happened in my childhood, and I can't do this today because that happened back then. And didn't have much luck. Went through dozens and dozens of different techniques and stuff, and never really achieved anything. If anything, it was getting worse. And also, because of the belief system within the New Age that you follow your dreams and only do what you love and that sort of thing, I also found I was getting more and more broke. I was getting further and further into poverty. Because, like most people, I didn't know what I wanted to do. What I really enjoyed. I've been brought up in a family where you work hard and you get paid for it. You go get a job, you work hard, and you get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. And then through my search, I found kinesiology. Kinesiology was a great technique and cleared a lot of the stuff for me. But then one day I was at a Mind, Body and Soul Expo and was just standing at a counter, and this gentleman came up to me. I was talking to a friend about a book on channeling, and this gentleman behind the counter walked over and started saying, "Don't open to channel, don't talk to your guides, don't do this, don't do that, rah, rah, rah." And we were sort of both shocked, and we were like, well, why? And his explanation shocked us even more, because it was basically, don't give your power away. Now, I'd heard this phrase hundreds of times in the New Age movement: don't give your power away, don't give your power away. But in hindsight, looking back after speaking to him, I found that a lot of the techniques within New Age were giving your power away. It was asking a clairvoyant, going to channeling sessions and asking questions, asking your guides to help you, and stuff like this. This guy was offering a workshop. Now, we stood and spoke to him for probably about half an hour. And he only mentioned the workshop once. He was over from Queensland, said, "I'm doing a workshop. It's $100 one day. You learn how to do the technique and have the technique done on you as well, so you get treated at the same time." And $100 a day is pretty standard price for a kinesiology workshop. So we went along to the workshop, and this guy was just amazing, the information he carried. I don't want to mention his name simply because I haven't been in contact with him for a few years, and rather than handing his name out and stuff without talking to him first. And it was on the way home from this workshop that a friend and I were driving back from Mandurah, which is down from Perth a little bit, and we both were pretty excited about what we'd sort of learnt that day. And we were driving back, and the sort of conversation died down. We weren't within radio range, so the radio was turned off, sort of thing. And I suddenly realised that when I stopped thinking, my head was empty. There was none of this chatter going on. So I mentioned to him, and he was going he paused for a few seconds and went, "Hey, yeah, me too." So then we got really excited, and we stopped, and we pulled off the road, and we sat on the bonnet and looked at the stars and talked about the implications of all this. Because as I said, I'd spent 5 years and probably thousands of dollars in workshops and books and tapes and all sorts of stuff to try and clear this. And here's this guy does this simple technique, and it was all gone. And this carried on into the next day, even to the extent that very close friends of mine, I walked into their house the next day and said hi and stuff, and sat down. They had friends over. And within a few minutes, they noticed the change in me so drastically that they were like, "Well, who are you? what have you done with Shay? And from that point on, the friend and I that did the workshop together, we experimented and we improved the technique and changed a few things. And now I find that probably 3 out of 5 people get the same results that I got. The 2 out of 5 that generally don't have a lot of stuff going on. For instance, I did a flatmate of mine who didn't have a lot of negative mind chatter, but she just found that she didn't mind doing the dishes anymore, which she realised a couple of days later. Normally she'll sort of put it off and put it off and put it off. And a couple of days after I did a session with her, she had a dinner party, so there's lots of dishes, and it was after she'd done the dishes, she said to me, I didn't realise till now that I just did them. I wasn't going, oh, don't want to do those, don't want to do those. And she didn't mind her mum asking if she'd met anyone yet, because she was, late 20s, and her mum was always, oh, you met anyone nice yet? And which just sort of push her buttons a little bit. And she found that was really easy to handle now. It didn't bother her anymore. But the other 3 people out of 5 that do get the results were getting really life-changing results. They were getting the results that I got from the session.
Mm-hmm. So the technique that you talk about, is it kinesiology or is it something entirely different?
It's kinesiology, but it's based in it's probably got about 3 or 4 styles combined, plus a lot of things I learnt through the New Age movement and stuff. Now, I don't promote the New Age at all since discovering this stuff. In fact, I had to take everything I'd learnt over those 5 or 6 years and basically stick it on the shelf and go through it item by item with this new knowledge to see what was empowering and what wasn't empowering.
So your new knowledge, what have you found out, Shay?
The changes in me were so drastic with the mind chatter gone. When this guy was explaining what he was going to do and what the workshop was about and the technique and stuff, I can remember sitting in the chair looking out the window behind, because it was just done in someone's front room of the house. There's about 6 of us doing the workshop, because he was from over east, so he was just doing it in his friend's house that he was staying at. And the sun was shining. There's puffs of white cloud in the blue sky, and I'm looking out the window going, can all this be true? I look outside and there's a normal world, and come back into the room and there's this really strange story unfolding. But the results spoke for themselves. I'd tried everything to clear my mind chatter, and nothing had worked. In fact, it just gradually was getting worse and worse. And running out of money, and that, of course, gets you tangled up in more stuff. The thing that came across in his story, or in the results, was that I had to sort of accept that what he had told us must be true due to the results I'd got, because all he had done was this technique that had removed something that had been there as long as I could remember. The thing he was talking about was the fact that we're not the highest on the food chain in the human race. Much like we have viruses and bacteria attacking us at different times in our life, we also have things on an energy level or a mental level that are attacking us. Now, these have been mentioned through history in lots of different ways, and the thing that comes to mind is people that are possessed, or schizophrenics that have really bad mind chatter and actually hear voices in their head and stuff like that. Now, the clients I was working with, we went through and did probably about 300 clients fairly quickly. And as I said, about 3 out of 5 got life-changing results from it. So the more we did it, the more we had to sort of accept that what this guy had told us was true. Now, what he was referring to was that most of us, probably 95% of us, have entities attached to us. Now, these entities actually not only drain our energy and have effects on our health and different levels of stuff, but they are the mind chatter that we hear in our head. Some of the entities are actually invited in as children when we have an invisible playmate. And as we progress on in life, usually a child will bring in an invisible playmate when they're under stress or duress, and they're in their room, they've been told off for something or whatever. They want someone to talk to, so they'll make an agreement and bring in something to play with and talk to. at that age, because they're so open and quite often very psychic, they can quite often see these entities, and the entities will appear as, friendly little elves or fairies or whatever, because they have the ability to mask what they really look like. So they bring these things in, but over the years, their parents tell them that, don't be silly, these things don't exist and that. So the conscious mind blocks them out, but the voice stays there. The voice stays as the negative mind chatter. Now, the entities can access anything in your mind, even stuff that you can't remember. So you've got no hope of dropping the baggage from the past, because the entities continually bring it up. And the reason they bring it up is they're probably the equivalent of a mischievous monkey, or say an adolescent that's stolen a car. They're getting to drive this human body and run amok with it and get it to do things, get it to take drugs, get it to drink a lot of alcohol, eat the wrong foods, and generally damage themselves. And the monkeys or the entities just enjoy it. They enjoy the ride. It's a bit of fun for them. This is what this guy was doing. So it turned out during the session that I was having, the entity I had came in when I was 11 years old. Now, at 11 years old, I had an appendicitis operation. Now, it was during one of two things: either the fear created while I was waiting for the operation, or it was created by the anaesthetic. The fact that anaesthetic works by pushing our energy bodies out of our physical body, which leaves our energy bodies vulnerable, because we don't have any conscious control over our energy bodies at the time. So quite often entities can attach there, but most likely was through an agreement. I prayed to God, or I prayed that someone would help me, or whatever. As an 11-year-old, I can't remember what it was I was actually going through at that stage. But I imagine, sitting in the pre-operation room, you've already had the pre-anaesthetic, so you're a bit sort of dopey and dreamy sort of thing. So there's a lot of stuff that could have gone on in my mind that was negative and caused me to make an agreement at that time.
Mm-hmm. And you feel that this agreement's ongoing?
No, through the process this gentleman taught us, we were able to actually cancel the agreements at the level they were created, and then by doing that, the entity can't get access anymore. So that was the reason why when we were driving home, both of us had clear minds when we stopped actually being excited about what we just discovered. Now, my mind's not clear all the time. I still get excited about things. I still think about things. I still think about the bills I've got to pay and that. But I find the most obvious part is I was very introverted. Like most people, I had a bit of a rough childhood. I've met a lot of people that had a lot rougher childhoods than I have. Mine certainly wasn't, the worst I've ever heard. In fact, it's probably, the better ones that I've heard. There was very minor things going on in my childhood.
The entity, Shay, you keep talking about the entity. What is this entity?
Well, it's like an energy parasite. It's no different from a bacteria or anything like that, only you could say it probably comes from the realms where they're not human yet, or they haven't evolved to a stage where they can actually become trees or animals or humans. But they can come in and access us and play around with us and interfere with our own thoughts. When I was, because I grew up in the country area and stuff like that, and then came to the city area. I grew up in an area where our school had 17 children in it. We had one teacher and one classroom. Because I always blamed that for being introverted and why I couldn't speak to groups of people and stuff like that. But it's only the entity that continually reminded me of that. As soon as the entity was removed, if I said to myself, oh, I'm going to speak in front of 20 people today, I wouldn't get the little voice going, oh, no, you can't, because you grew up in a school with 17 kids, and so this excuse didn't come up. It would just be blank. I would go, I'm going to do such and such. It would be blank. Which, when you come to manifesting, the powerful point about manifesting is making the statement, putting the intent forward, and then letting it go. What the entity does is it cuts in the second after you make that intention and goes, oh, you can't because such and such, or it failed last time, or comes in with a negative comment that almost cancels it out. It's like your subconscious is ready to go, yes, and give it to you, and then the entity cuts in and has this comment which cancels, so the subconscious sits back again and waits for the next command it gets.
Mm. So things like the education systems and so forth, do you feel that they're good the way they are, or is there a problem with them?
I'm not really qualified to answer on that, but on a personal level, yes, I do think there's a lot that could be done with it. For example, the Japanese culture, right from kindergarten onwards, they have 1 hour every day where they deal with either commerce or the importance of family or the importance of work ethics and a whole range of subjects that gives them a very good basis for being productive later in their life and supporting the community. Now, I'm not saying that the Japanese culture is perfect or anything like that. I mean, they still have their challenges. But there's certain areas within their culture that are very good. For example, a friend of mine was in Japan for quite a while, and she was mentioning that if they're on a train and someone's drunk, because the trains are so packed in Japan, if there's someone that's drunk and it's a bit falling over and so, someone will actually get up and let them sit down so that that person doesn't interfere with everyone else. So it sort of puts them out of the way and lets them sit down so they're not knocking into everyone and disrupting everyone. So little things like that, which of course start through the education and childhood, I think.
I've got some other questions. Apparently the body knows all the answers to everything that sits out there. What does stacking the questions mean?
Okay, kinesiology, there's a style of kinesiology that where we ask a series of questions, and each time you ask a question, you save the answer from the last question within the body. And now, if somebody was to stand with their feet apart, we have proprioceptors in our hips that tell the brain 16,000 times a second where our body is. Okay, all the muscles, the ligaments and tendons and that all have these proprioceptors that instruct the brain. So when you go to turn and take a step, your brain knows exactly where your feet are, which muscles to activate to take that step. So if I'm asking a question using kinesiology and I get a response from the muscle saying yes or no, either a weak muscle or a strong muscle giving a yes-no answer, and I put my feet apart at the same time, because it's a muscle response, it records that information. So it's called stacking the information in your hips or your hip circuit. By doing that, I can actually go through and ask a series of questions. Maybe by the end of the session, I might have 20 or 30 or 50 questions, the answers to these questions in the circuit. We then, when we're doing the corrections, we're doing it in relation to all these answers that we've got. For example, we may be tracing back a priority cause for something that's going on in someone's life, whether it be a pain or an allergy or something like that. So we'll go back and we'll access the age that it first occurred at, whether it was a male or female that was involved in the circumstances that caused that emotion, exactly what emotion it was that they felt. We have a chart with 420 emotions on it, so we can pinpoint it using the muscle, asking the body which one is the most priority emotion that it wants to have in circuit. And we'll take it through. So we might have a whole range of questions. And quite often, once we get deeper and deeper into it, the person will actually physically remember or consciously remember the answer to what the situation was. A good example of this was a lady that was in one of our workshops. She'd had 5 car accidents. She had a lot of, she wasn't driving any of the cars. She was passengers in all the cars. She had a lot of aches and pains from the whiplash and the jarring and stuff in the accident. The instructor wanted to demonstrate priority cause. Okay, we knew the cause of her pain was the accidents, but what was the priority cause for the pain? So we, by taking her back through her ages and finding the emotions and the age and where it started from, it turned out that once we got down to that, it was at the age of 5, it was a teacher, it was a male, and at that stage, and a few other emotions evolved and a few other things, she was then able to pinpoint exactly what it was. And it turned out to be her teacher. She was German and the teacher was Jewish, and the teacher used to call her a Nazi whenever the other kids couldn't hear it. He actually used to call her something else, but I won't actually say what he used to call her. He used to call her Nazi something or other. Now, it turned out his name was Mr. Carr. Her subconscious wanted her to release the pain she was holding in her energy fields that related back to this issue, and it was Mr. Carr. So the subconscious, all those years, it probably gave her lots of other messages through the years, but it was getting more and more desperate to have this issue dealt with. Therefore, the messages were getting louder and louder and louder. Okay, so the 5 car accidents were enough for her to then end up in this kinesiology workshop and then access it through this and find out it was Mr. Carr was causing her pain. And therefore, the car accidents were just the closest way the subconscious could get the message to her.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, but to ask her up front, say, well, God, can you remember anything in your childhood that would do this? You know, she wouldn't have remembered it. But as we went back and accessed little bits and pieces of it, it triggered in her mind and focused her to a point where she could actually find the thing that was doing it.
So the same thing keeps happening, like a hit on the head, until you actually realise why it's happening.
Yes.
And then hopefully it stops.
Yeah. Quite often these are referred to like pinches and punches. Okay, you get pinches and punches, and if you don't get the message, then they turn into bigger punches and bigger punches. Till, in some cases, you might end up in a car accident where you got 6 months in hospital to think about things, and in that that 6 months, you get time to think about things, and you uncover what it was that you actually needed to deal with. So obviously, it's a lot better to get it when it's a pinch before it gets to being a punch.
So what is your unorthodox view of the history of the world, starting at, say, the pyramids and moving all the way to today?
I think the pyramids, from muscle testing with kinesiology and a few other things I've researched, are negative. I think they hold the planet in a frequency of forgetfulness. All the planets within our solar system have actually got monuments on them of some sort. We know of the ones on Mars, we know of the ones here on planet Earth. And these are designed to keep our solar system in forgetfulness so that we can't tune into who we really are, which are immense beings of power. We're actually being recycled continuously. We're not actually progressing or moving forward at the moment. All we do is get recycled. As soon as we pass on, we get recycled and get stuck straight back into another body. And this is for the purposes of farming us. Much the same as we farm cows, there's other beings farming us for the energy that we produce, which on their level is something tangible that they can actually touch and eat, consume. They don't eat food as the way we eat it because they live on a different energy level. They're consuming food that's a different energy from what we are. We consume food. Scientifically, we consume food for the vitamins and the minerals and stuff like that, but really on an energy level, we're consuming it for the consciousness it contains. Therefore, fresh and raw food has more consciousness left in it than cooked or processed food. Therefore, it's better for us.
So who is they, Shay? When you speak about they, who is they?
They. There's many groups of aliens, I believe, have been here in the past. I believe we were genetically engineered by these people. The Darwinism nowadays is starting to fall apart more and more. I don't believe in the side from the religious point of view where someone just sort of snaps their fingers and then everything magically appears. So on a physical level, we have been genetically engineered. I mean, they've never been able to find the missing link between man and ape. We sort of magically appeared, at a certain time frame. And I think from that point on, I think those that designed us or did the DNA manipulation have had a hand in what's going on at the moment in regards to controlling us and using us as basically as cattle, as food for their own purposes.
So who is in control of everything? Government, finance, the law? Who controls all these things?
There are a race of aliens called the reptilians. The reptilians, I believe, are the ones that did the genetic engineering of us in the first place. They crossed some of their DNA from another race that were slave labourers for them, using theirs and crossing it with the ape, the DNA from the ape, and were able to create what they call the Adamas. Which stands for he of the red blood, which is strange that it actually matches up with the word Adam, that Adamus and Adam are very, very close words to each other. So whether in translation or deliberately or whatever, they've just been slightly changed. And all this occurred around the Mesopotamia area, and that used to be the Garden of Eden. They now know from studies and that used to be lush tropical forest and stuff many years ago. So this was the Garden of Eden, and even right through to the stories of getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden for having knowledge. There were two reptilian brothers. One was a production engineer, and one was a genetic engineer. They were here on the planet mining the gold from the planet to use on their own planet. Their planet has a very large orbit, so it travels a long way from the sun, and they use gold as part of creating a greenhouse effect around the planet to hold the heat in, so that they, even though they're a long way from the sun, they can still maintain their their culture and their lifestyle. So they were here mining us. The the genetic engineer was playing around building plants and animals and designing different creatures and stuff while he was here in this Garden of Eden with all these wonderful creatures that didn't attack each other or anything because they were new to the world sort of thing. They didn't have that sort of, they were being fed and looked after and stuff. They didn't need to like attack each other. The brother that was doing the genetic engineer wanted to get in favour of his father. Okay, so he started producing the Adamas as labourers for the mining, because the other group that they had with them, the Nephilim, were very annoyed that they were a long way from home. They were in tough conditions and stuff. They just didn't like it, and quite often would go out on strike and resist and rebel and stuff like that. So the genetic engineer thought, okay, well, we can create these new creatures that'll follow orders, and then there won't be a problem. But what happened was the production engineer, the production manager, the other brother, who was only interested in results, what was being done, the amount of gold being produced, etc., etc. So he would work them to death till they died. Now the genetic engineer didn't like this because these are like his babies, these are his creations. He didn't like seeing them being worked to death. So there was another race of beings contacted him. In Indian culture, they're referred to as children of the feather. This is where the legends of angels and that come from. This was a race of beings who came down and said they liked what he was doing with this experiment, but it lacked something. It lacked a spark that would make it rebellious. It would make it only take so much, and then it would say nah and rebel against it. So they gave him a little piece of DNA that would be included with the Adama's DNA that would make it rebellious and not take too much rubbish from anyone. And it would be self-actualizing. It would actually grow and become more aware, and as it aged, it would become more and more aware through the generations. At one stage, because they were being worked to death still, the genetic engineer brother decided to take them to the side, and he taught a couple of them how to have sex, therefore giving them knowledge. Okay, all of a sudden they wouldn't work anymore. Okay, they'd be sent off to do something that would go off for ages, come back not having done it, with big grins on their faces. So they sorted out the ones that had this knowledge and the ones that didn't have the knowledge, and they banished the ones that had the knowledge and kicked them out and sent them out into the desert, trusting that they would die and wouldn't survive. But unfortunately for the production manager, they did survive, and they flourished out in the desert, and they managed to cope for themselves and find food and all the rest of it, and of course reproduce and create more and more generations. This is where I see it came from. Now the production manager is what we see as being God, and the genetic engineer was the devil. The devil gave him knowledge. Now supposedly for his punishment for giving this knowledge to the Adamas, he had his arms and legs chopped off, because the reptilians are a very draconian race. They're a very warlike race. The Star Trek movies with the Klingons is probably the closest example to their general attitude. They're just warlike and very very masculine energy, I suppose you would say.
So you feel we're part of this, recalcitrant race that's come out of, these collective beings that were taught how to reproduce.
Yes. Is
that who we are?
Yes, I believe much the same as the story of Adam and Eve were as the first man and woman. The Adamas and the female that was created from the Adamas, which obviously was created from the DNA from the first one, which is, in old times they wouldn't be able to say, well, it was created from DNA, so they just went, well, it's created from a part of this one and we made this one out of it. So that's where the rib comes into the story.
So did the reptilians then leave once we became prolific in the world, or?
Actually, once they'd been here and they'd settled and they'd started producing plant life and animal life, they actually decided they quite liked it here. Even though they don't function on a physical level that we see today, they function on an energy level. They're involved with manipulation of our society right from the start. I mean, we have never ever been free from the reptilian intervention in our thoughts and our activities and stuff like that. When I mentioned earlier about the entities interfering with us, also find the average person on the street generally has an entity or something that just chatters away in their head and says, you can't do this and you can't do that. And, you know, when that person said that to you, you should have said this to them. And that's how we get caught up in all this negative and, you know, and rehashing all our baggage all the time. After I was cleared by the gentleman that showed us this technique, and after clients are cleared, it's like the past just disappears. You can still think about it. I can still go back and think about my childhood and what happened, but I've actually got to make a conscious effort to do it. It's not something that just pops into my head all the time when I'm least expecting it, or when I'm a little bit down or something, and to drag me further down. So the reptilians have always been here. They use this as a food source. As I said, they like to, and the food they thrive on is negative emotion. They love to create a negative emotion in people. Therefore, they're interested in controlling the heads of governments, the heads of banks, the heads of countries, because being in control of these people gives them control over the emotions of thousands of people. One bank manager making the decision to raise interest rates causes untold emotional stress and pain for thousands and thousands of families. So being in this position of power gives them a lot of control. So the average person on the street probably only has an entity interfering, but once you get higher up in business, in banks, in governments, and military, you're talking about people that generally have reptilian interference directly, or some of the cohorts, which are the greys or the aliens, the little guys with the big eyes. The grey race was enslaved by the reptilians many centuries ago, and they actually pushed the greys into nuclear war, and they destroyed their planet. And I have a feeling they're pretty much trying to do the same with us now. They're trying to push us to a level where we're going to enter into a nuclear war. This is why the greys have the big eyes and the short stature and stuff, because a certain number of them went underground during the nuclear war. They then did genetic engineering to build themselves so they could live underground, because they couldn't go back to the surface of the planet anymore. So they redesigned their digestive system, their eyesight, so they could see in the dark easier, and a lot of other their physical features. They didn't need big strong bodies anymore to do what they were doing before, so they genetically engineered themselves to be very efficient food wise. They didn't have big muscles, therefore they didn't use a lot of energy and that sort of thing. And the genetic engineering was assisted or was expanded reasonably quickly, simply because by building themselves smaller they weren't able to give natural birth anymore. So then they went completely to genetic engineering test tube baby system. So, but now they're in a situation where the gene pool was too small when this was occurring. So now they're getting more and more defects in their race, and the race is dying. So now they're interested in harvesting human DNA, or they have been interested in harvesting human DNA for many years now, in the hope of doing a cross hybrid, so that they can rebuild their race and survive and keep going.
That makes incredible sense. So you're saying that the reptilians are interested in having control over heads of, bank, heads of state, heads of government. What do they look like? Who are they? Are they people that we know in disguise, or are they something that we just don't see?
We don't actually. Clairvoyants, or not so much clairvoyants, but people that work with energy and can see into that dimension are able to see the reptilians. They can come to the physical level, but it's very uncomfortable for them to do it, and it seems to be a big effort for them to do it, and they only do it when they really need to. They tend to stay on their energy level, because that's where they're more comfortable, and that's where they can manipulate the whole of society from that level. You only need to look at some of the things that go on in our world. I mean, a lot of people think that it's just for money, but our society and our health and everything is under threat from the actions being taken at much higher levels. There's so many foods that aren't good for us, but the people in charge of that, the boards or whatever, like the milk board or the different corporations, will research and come up with contradictory findings, so that in the end there is no answer to it. It's not, yes, it is bad for you, no, it's not. It's just like, well, maybe it is. This one says it is, this one says it's not. So, and people get confused, I think, and it's just like they go, well, everything's bad for you, so I'll just eat what I want. So consequently, we continue to eat stuff that's not good for us, and then we wonder why diabetes and cancer and heart disease and stuff is all on the increase when we're continually eating stuff that's not good for us. Basically, the best food for us is fresh and raw, and there's no shortage of people that have cured themselves from cancer and all sorts of diseases by going back to fresh, raw diets.
These diseases that you mentioned, do you think that there's something that we are just inflicted with, or do you think it's something that gets put in from, perhaps other sources that we don't really realise? Yeah,
some of them do. Some of them you need to remember that from a quantum physics point of view, we are just energy. Everything around us is just energy. There's no such thing as a physical or a hard thing in our reality from the quantum physics point of view. When they break down matter to its smallest particle, all they find is energy in empty space. And amazingly enough, it's 99.999999% empty space. So basically, the equivalent, if you were to scale up an atom to the size of a football field, then the nucleus of the atom would be a pea sitting in the middle of that football oval, and the electron is a grain of sand travelling at the speed of light around the boundary. So that's a huge amount of empty space inside an atom. And this is what everything's made of. Everything's made of atoms, so everything's just empty energy and empty space. But from some wonder of the brain or our psyche or energy levels or just consciousness, we make it into physical objects that we can touch and feel and interact with. And I think we did that deliberately. I think at one stage we were powerful beings that knew everything there was to know. And we realised that the only thing we didn't know couldn't experience was not knowing. So to experience not knowing, we decided to lock ourselves into a physical reality where we would stay there until we remembered who we were, and then we'd wake up. It's much like when you're having a dream. It's so real when you're in the dream, or the nightmare is a good example. You could be running all night in this nightmare, scared and panicked, and then you wake up and you go, oh, it's just a dream. I feel very much that when we wake up, when we pass on from this life, that it'll be the same experience. We'll just wake up and go, oh, okay, so it was just a dream. But at the moment, what's happening is we've been given a belief system that keeps us trapped. Now, this belief system is based around religion to start with, but it's been expanded recently into the New Age and stuff like that. To me, the New Age movement is just religion rehashed, and it's just reworded, but it's still got all the same disempowering features in it. We're taught to go to the light, and through countless books and tapes and people that have passed on and stuff, that we go to this light. Now, there's a striking resemblance, similarity between this light, this bright white tunnel of light we go to, and the bright white tunnel of light that people see when they're abducted. When people are abducted, they quite often are sucked up into this bright white light. Now, a lot of people say, well, white light's good, it's the combination of all light. To me, light has no colour. Light is the combination of all colours, or light is clear. It doesn't have a colour. It doesn't have a colour till it hits something. Mm-hmm. So this white light is something else. So I believe, and this was taught to us by the guy that showed us the technique originally, that basically once we leave the body, we're taught to go to the light. We go to the light, our memory's wiped, and we're stuck straight back in another physical body. So we don't get any choice about which body we're going to. We're not choosing parents. We're not choosing anything. Basically, we're just cattle for them. They just whack us, wipe our memory, send us straight back. To me, the only way to escape this is to die aware and not go to the light. Now, I can't prove this is true, but I know when it's my turn, I won't go to the light. I'll instead ask my higher consciousness, which at that level you're a lot more in touch with your intuition and you're the real aspect of who you are, because you've already dropped the physical and the mind and stuff associated with it. So asking from that level, what do I need to do now? What is in my highest growth? Do I go to this light, or is there something else that would give me much more growth? And that way we're giving a choice then, rather than just automatically going to it because that's what everyone else says, I think they deliberately choose people to bring into the light and then send them back. just so that these people will then go out and talk about it, write books about it, and it strengthens this belief that people will go to the light and then obviously be recycled again. To me, I can't see any reason to continually come back here and learn hard lessons. If we can wake up to the fact that we're conscious, aware time travellers that are just experiencing being human for a short period of time, then why would we continually want to come back and experience that over and over and over and over again, maybe thousands of times? It makes sense that, once we learn who we are, then we'll move on to the next stage and we'll start learning something different.
What is the next stage? What's the alternative? If you choose not to go to the light, where do we go?
Well, I won't know till I get there. I've heard people speak of, when you go to the astral realm, it's like thousands of times better there than it is here. The feeling is 1,000 times better than it is here. And if we were given the choice, we'd never return. If we went there, we just wouldn't want to go back to the physical body again. So I think it's always growth. It's always, we come here, it's a classroom, we learn, we leave this classroom, we'll go to the next level of classroom. There'll still be more stuff to learn. We're not going to float around on a cloud forever. We're going to go there and we're going to have other challenges or opportunities, and we're going to grow from those and continue on.
What about your feeling with particular families and friends? Some people say that they know that they've met such and such before in another life, or they've been together in another life. Does that really carry on? Or if you choose not to go to the light and you go to another consciousness, do you then be with those people again? Or is it just...
There's several ways. It could be that we're actually the same soul that's just split up into different groups, and maybe the memory wiping isn't really efficient sometimes. Maybe there's traces of memory are left, and we carry those on, and that we recognise in the other person that we've seen them before, we've known them before. That's the way I see it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You speak of opportunities all the time, and how the universe places before us opportunities that stem from our subconscious. What's an opportunity clock?
What's an opportunity clock? Well, that's not actually mine. That's from a Zig Ziglar tape. Opportunity clock's your alarm clock when you wake up in the morning. It's funny that we call an alarm clock, because generally an alarm is like a fire alarm or a smoke alarm or a medical alarm or an ambulance alarm. It's generally negative stuff. It's like jump, quick, panic, run. Whereas an opportunity clock we've got the opportunity to get up and go and change our lives, as opposed to being alarmed. That's a strange question.
Strange question. Certain words have different meanings for you, yet a paradigm shifts in our quest for truth. In society, what is meant by the lies between the truths?
Okay, the entities love to function, especially through clairvoyance and stuff. Obviously, you go to a clairvoyant, you're giving your power away straight away. You're going, I don't know how to fix me. Can you tell me what I'm supposed to do? Now, if the clairvoyant will always have an entity with them, and if you have an entity yourself when you go to them, those entities communicate on an energy level, and she can tell you everything about you. That's no mystery. It's able to access exactly what's going on and what's who your sister is and what happened to her last year and all the rest. But what happens is, once it gets your confidence, they also know what to tell you to take you off your path. So by telling you a few truths about things that are going on in your family, you go, oh wow, this person really switched on. So you're already making an agreement this person knows what they're talking about. And then the person may say, oh, you're going to, there's this rich, tall, dark, handsome man going to come into your life, or when they may know well that it's actually a short, blonde-haired, chubby guy that would be the perfect partner for you. But because they've implanted just this little thought, this little idea into your mind, you sort of miss that person and you see this other person, which leads you off your path and leads you into more turmoil and frustration, which of course feeds the entities and the aliens, the reptilians, just gives them more food. I've never... Any of the time I've been working on people, if they're not involved in, as a practitioner, working on other people, then they've generally only got an entity with them. Unless they've got something really serious going on in their life, like they're schizophrenic and there's other stuff going on, then it's quite often a lot more heavy duty. But I've never ever done a practitioner yet that doesn't have etheric equipment in them or direct alien interference. Now, alien interference is a lot stronger than entity interference. And the reason that I think they do this is they know people are going to come and give their power away to this person. Therefore, it's very easy for them to establish new agreements and stop this person from progressing in their life. So basically, the practitioner has access to people, and the people coming to them are willing to give their access to that practitioner. So therefore, for example, I did a lady who was very perceptive, could see energy fields and auras and touch them and feel them and stuff. And we took her back through her experiences and took her back through the memories of where she made the agreements originally. And one of the memories she came across was a Reiki workshop. Now, she looked at the Reiki practitioners. They both had reptilians standing behind them. She looked at somebody getting work done on another table, and there's a reptilian standing behind the person doing the Reiki on the person lying on the massage table. Spiritual healing and Reiki and that line are probably the most disempowering, because basically you're going there and going, I can't fix me, you have to fix me. Now, not only they give them their power away, the practitioner does, because the practitioner goes, well, I'll just open to the universe and bring stuff through me and give it to you. Everything is within us. I mean, all the religions, the basis of all our religions tell us that, which was the message the people that, like Jesus and Moses and Muhammad and Krishna were trying to get through, that the energy was within you. There's nothing outside of you. Everything outside is just a mirror. Everything is within you. You don't need anything else. So these people are giving their power away and going outside themselves. The practitioners are giving their power away and going outside themselves. And they don't know where this energy is coming from. They are taught that it's universal love, or it's this or it's that, but they have no way of proving one way or the other. Now, quite often, in my experience, a lot of these practitioners' lives are very messed up. Same with the clairvoyants. A lot of the clairvoyants, being in the New Age movement for 5 or 6 years before doing this, I met and worked with a lot of these people. And generally their lives are very messed up. And after I discovered this, I did do sessions on a lot of these people. And they were amazed at the results. Even though they didn't want to believe what I was telling them about what was going on, they couldn't argue with the results they were getting. Going from feeling like they're being attacked or whatever in their house and doing clearances on their house all the time and that sort of stuff, to going out and dancing and having a good time rather than sitting around the house doing meditations and stuff, trying to clear energies and all the rest. Suddenly they felt protected and safe and just went out and enjoyed life instead of, cowering in the house, worrying about stuff.
So you feel that their lives were a bit of a mess because they had let in so much of the entities' interference.
They'd given so much power away to these entities that they were just running their lives for them. Especially a lot of people, in the New Age will communicate with their guides and stuff like that. One example was an 80-year-old lady I did. She'd been channeling her guides, which she thought were angels, for 20 or 30 years, and she did sessions with people, and the guides come through and told her, and she'd heard about me through a friend or something and just wanted to try it. She's one of the people that something new comes along, she just wanted to try it. I did a session with her, and back at that stage we used to actually bring the entity up through the body and command it to come through the body as its true self and answer the questions. And using the technique we did, they would do this. They would come up, especially she was used to opening to channel and letting these things speak through her. Because we commanded it come up through as its true self, when it did come up, it came up not as this sweet, loving angel voice, but as a husky, rough voice like you would see in some movie, where the person's possessed. And it was swearing and cursing and going right off. But she could feel on an energy level that it was the same being, and was just totally amazed that all these years that this thing had been hiding and pretending that it was one of her angel guides. And this is why the guy originally who taught us was saying, you don't talk to your angels, don't talk to, everything is within you. You don't need to go outside yourself, even to your own guides to ask. After all, no positive being is going to give away. No positive being is interested in taking your power, therefore positive being isn't going to answer your question. Your guides aren't interested in taking your power. They're there to assist you and organise things in your life, not to directly interfere and say, do this, do that, right? Because that would be taking your power, which would be a negative thing, which they're just not interested in doing. So the only people that are, or the only energies that are going to come through and answer questions for you are going to be negative energies, but they'll pretend to be positive. Same as like we were talking earlier about when we pass over and we go to the light, quite often people meet dead relatives and all the rest. Quite often these are just aliens or reptilians with a facade of showing the other person, but it's not really their dead relative. Their dead relative's already had their memory wiped and been sent back into another body. These are just reptilians they pretend to be and get you to come to the light. Come on, let's go this way. So yeah, it's just another part of the trap.
Now, Shay, you mentioned equipment before. What equipment are you referring to?
Okay, we have many layers to our energy fields. Depending on where you read, we have mental bodies and emotional bodies and etheric bodies, astral bodies. Because we have all these layers, and because the reptilians exist on a different energy level from us, they also have equipment. Now, the equipment's the same frequency as they are, so therefore it's resonating at the same frequency as our etheric body is. So this equipment can then be inserted into our body and can do a range of things depending on what the equipment is. Some of the equipments are like inlines. Inlines allow them to stick emotions in whenever they choose. So they can stick an inline into someone's heart area and make them feel whatever emotion they want, whenever they want. So the person may all of a sudden, just feel sad. And by doing this, they can control the person. The person may be planning on going and doing something, and the entity or the reptilian knows that if that person goes and does that, they're going to meet this person, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, they're going to go forward in their life. So they don't really want to meet that person. So they stick an emotion that makes the person feel a bit, moody or a bit annoyed or procrastinating or some emotion that actually stops them going and do it. They just go, oh, okay, I won't bother doing that, and they just sit and read a book or if they're used to doing work on themselves, like clearing themselves and putting white light over themselves, they'll sit and do meditations and stuff instead because they know there's something going on. They can feel something negative going on, but that stops them going and meeting this person. They also have outlines which allow them to drain energy off for the same reason. The person's going to go do something, they'll just drain energy off, so the person suddenly just feels tired. They decide to stay home and have a meal and have an early night instead. Whereas if they'd gone out, they would have met this person and maybe then met someone else and then learned something really fantastic that took them forward in their life. So they can control what we're doing. And there's a whole range of equipment they use, inlines, outlines, plugs, implants. And they've been in control of our media and our movies, our TV. The first movie that they had direct influence in, or the first movie or TV show, was my favourite Martian. Now, that goes back to the black and white TV days. So they've been involved in the media since then in influencing what we think. Now, because they know that we're self-creating prophecies, that whatever we think and feel and that we create. So therefore, if they can create the belief of negative stuff, like you look at all the scary movies, it's always about having something in you. You got an implant in you, or you got this monster inside you, or you got all these things inside you, and it's so close to the truth that it really grabs us, because on some level we do know that we're being interfered with, but just not on a conscious level. Because it's so close to the truth, it really grabs our attention in that, and therefore we want to know more. So you watch this thing, but the trouble is the information within the film actually keeps us trapped even further into what we're doing, where we were.
So why don't we see them or feel these, pieces of equipment? Why aren't we feeling?
For the same reason we can't.
Apart from the emotion, we obviously feel if they're draining us, we suddenly feel drained, but why can't we see?
Well, the same reason that the average person can't see their etheric body, because they're on an etheric level, on an energy level, they're not aware of it. They feel the results of it. Through the learning curve we went through after this gentleman taught us the technique, and we were experimenting and trying different techniques and different ways of doing it, there's several times I ended up with equipment in me, because obviously they don't want me doing what I do, so they're threatened by what I'm doing. So any opportunity they got, they would stick equipment in me to try and keep me get me back off track again. And a couple of times I got very close to it. I've got into situations where I've become very emotional and got caught up in it, but was aware enough to go, hang on a minute, something's going on here. So I go in and redo the technique, find out there's equipment there or whatever, remove it, and instantly I could have been caught up in something for 2 or 3 days, and the negative emotions and depressed and that, and do a session and the equipment's removed and instantly feel, start laughing. The change is like within a few seconds. The technique only takes 5 or 10 seconds to do. So that 5 or 10 seconds, all of a sudden, I'm the complete opposite of what I've been for 3 days. So the effects of the equipment is drastic once you know what you're looking for. Once you've felt what it's like to be free of equipment and then to have equipment put back in again, it's very noticeable.
Is there a way to prevent it being put back in?
Don't make new agreements. Now, when I have got it back in, it's through I've been involved in a situation where I've made new agreements that have allowed them to put it back in. So we've gone back in and then using the technique to break those agreements so that they can't be reinserted again. But I mean, all of us, you get caught up in the physical world, and maybe get caught up in an argument with someone, and in that argument you make a verbal agreement about something, and then that agreement. It seems to be a universal law. Should any two beings agree on one thing, then so be it. And I believe it's actually in the Bible as well, written in the Bible. So, Jesus and these earlier prophets and that were trying to let us know that, these are powerful things. Once two people agree on one thing, then so be it. So negative people constantly reinforce each other's agreements and their beliefs and attitudes by, the typical example I'm talking, if I'm talking to a client I've just done a session with or something, is so many times I've heard women say, all men are this or all men are that. And the other one will go, that's an agreement. So therefore, why would that a person expect to meet anyone different? They've already got an agreement in place that all men are such and such. So therefore they continue to meet men that are like that. And until they break that cycle, they continue to meet men that are like that, or break the agreements.
So syntax and the way that we say things is very, very important, obviously, then.
Oh, definitely. Even to the point where I can tell just on a feeling level if somebody's got a lot of interference or a lot of equipment that's is controlling them or dominating their attitudes and their beliefs. And the feeling for me is just I just don't have any time for them. It's just like I just want to leave the room or go do something else. But the other side's equally true. I meet people that don't have equipment in them quite often as well, or if they do have any interference going on at all, they're so positive in their outlook on life and stuff that they're actually overriding it. They're taking the frequency up high enough that it no longer affects them. One of the ways to move past all this stuff is to simply move into unconditional love, because unconditional love for yourself takes your frequency up. Once your frequency goes up, you're out of the range where the agreement was made that allowed the entities in. So once you go out of that, then the entities can't interfere with you anymore anyway. And if they do, your positive attitude is so strong that it's just like you just sort of ignore that negative chatter, and you move on with your life. Whereas, if you get caught up in a negative situation, maybe a relative's passed away or something like that, so you've moved into sadness, then the entities really play on that, and they'll get you caught up in other stuff that adds to it and continually builds on this. The other thing is, like, entities can pass themselves on to other people. Quite often entities will reincarnate with a person. If they've been with that link to that person for a long time, they actually reincarnate and come back into the next life with them. Child molesters, there's so many cases where child molesters, when they trace their history, have been molested as children themselves. Now what happens is that the person doing the molesting has got an entity that's pushed them to being that negative and doing such a horrid thing. And what happens is the energy of the situation passes the entity or portion of the entity onto the child. So then the child carries that entity and possibly will do the same later in life themselves. Now it doesn't excuse them for doing this, because they've still got the free will to go, well, I'm not going to do that. Even though I have the urge to do it or whatever, I'm still not going to do it. And to seek help, which to improve their growth and then maybe move into becoming more self-empowered and then more unconditional love for themselves, and the entity drops away because it can't interfere with them anymore because they've moved into that unconditional love aspect. But many times, unfortunately, people get caught up in it because they don't know that it's not their thoughts. They think it's their thoughts, and therefore they act upon their thoughts, or get caught up in listening to them.
I think unconditional love is something that we all desperately seek for at times, and there seems to be so many paths from when we're very young that seem to want to just break that down. You're not worthy, you're not, even you're not good at running. It's silly things that gradually build as you get older that take that away from you. So how do you overcome that?
Well, I found that the easiest way that I overcome it was meeting this guy and having this technique done that removed the entities and broke the agreements. Once the entities removed and broke the agreements, I could then use a lot of the stuff that I had come across in the New Age that hadn't worked before, like positive affirmations and asking the right questions and that sort of thing. They'd now worked, whereas before they weren't working because the negative chatter would override it and cancel it out. Like I was saying earlier, you make a statement, the subconscious is ready to do it. You say, okay, I am rich. The subconscious goes, okay, well, I'll start organising to bring you more wealth. But subconscious, the negative chatter or the entity goes, no, you're not. You can't even afford to buy this or that. So it cancels it out. So you put forward the intent, but then you cancel it. And the subconscious doesn't have any ability to reason. We reason with our conscious mind, and then decide what it is we're going to do and pass that instruction to the subconscious, and the subconscious organises it. Like the lady with the school teacher, Mr. Carr. Her subconscious had gone to a huge amount of trouble to get her into a car that was going to be in an accident. Okay. Now, obviously, the driver of the car had their lessons in that as well, which would have been totally different. So the subconscious has found other people that have matching things so they could stick them together and put them in that situation. And, I mean, that may take ages or years for the subconscious to try and organise.
Try and organise. Now, obviously, thinking about the images in my mind of having attachments and equipment inside me is quite alarming. And obviously you don't want that, you don't want to think about that happening to other people, particularly your children and so forth. Is there a way to create a free environment for them that they never have to deal with that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, the unconditional love is probably the most powerful thing. The reptilians and the greys and that cannot stand focused emotion. We are very, very strong. Just in the way that the technique is done, we were able to take reptilians that were dominating and controlling anything up to 100, 200 people through their connections to the equipment and stuff. Now, we could get rid of them just as easily as we could just an entity that's controlling one person, which to me proved that we are very powerful beings. And these reptilians and entities and that know it, and that's the reason they're trying to keep us in forgetfulness and stop us from moving forward into who we are. And they do this through countless ways in our society, through pressure and work and all the rest of it. They just try and keep us locked in forgetfulness. So the more we can move into unconditional love for ourselves and for other people, and dropping the judgments, the higher our frequency goes. The higher the frequency goes, the less these things can interfere with us, because we are far more powerful than what they are. The only reason they have any power at all is because we've given our power away to them by saying, please help me or whatever. This is probably most evident especially in earlier years, earlier civilization. It was through religion, praying to God, God help me do this, God help me do that. Now, in kinesiology and the muscle testing, we've found that God on a genetic memory level actually refers back to a being called Draco. And now Draco is the ruler that the expression draconian law comes from. If you want an example of draconian law, then Saddam Hussein operates through draconian law, where they'll cut hands and feet off and stuff for the smallest of crimes. And back in these early days, this is how the rulers ruled. They ruled with an iron fist, and a loaf of bread was you lost your hand, just through wanting to feed your children or whatever. So the genetic memory being carried, when people say, God help me, it's like saying, reptilian help me. you know. It's an agreement straight away with these other beings. Now, it doesn't always, quite often I think the reptilians aren't interested in specific people because their life path doesn't involve anything that, you know, they've already got an entity, they're stuck in negativity, they don't need to stick any more equipment in them or anything like that. If they were then to go on to become practitioners where they're going to do therapy with other people and stuff, then the reptilians would become interested in them and sticking more equipment in them and to, you know, give them better access. When we first started doing this, we were just under constant attack. We actually had to go in and do new agreements that this guy hadn't taught us because he was under the belief that if you moved into a negative agreement, into a negative emotion, that you would be attacked. And he would say if he moves into a negative emotion, he would get 20 or 30 bits of equipment whacked at him, and it would take him 24 hours to clear these bits of equipment using the way he did it. Now, we did a client using his technique, took us 4 hours to do. She had over 30 bits of equipment in her. She had memories tracing back to Nazi Germany and a whole range of stuff. But she'd also had a headache for 30 years. She'd had 3 open head surgery operations, exploratory, to try and find out why she had headaches and stuff. As we pulled the last piece of equipment out, her headache disappeared. And I spoke to her the last time, I spoke to her probably about 12 months after that, and the headaches hadn't come back. So she'd had these headaches for 30, and it just controlled her and, you know, kept her locked in a certain belief. Why, I don't know, why they specifically wanted her. Maybe when, you know, another 20 years' time she's going to do something that, you know, will help a lot of people. So they just wanted her locked into a situation where she just wouldn't have access to the intuition and that side of it. And that's another thing that improved. I did a lady who, I did quite a few other kinesiologists and stuff around me that I'd known for years. I did one lady and she found her intuition was way stronger. She actually muscle tested to find out what her intuition was before the session and then after the session, and she'd had almost a 40 to 50% increase in intuition levels. Now, you know, that's the other thing the entities and that do. They interfere with our intuition, so we can't get on our path because we can't access our intuition. And the reason we can't access our intuition is intuition comes in the gaps between our thoughts. Now, if the entity is filling those gaps with rubbish from your past, you're not going to access intuition, and you're not going to be in the right mind frame to access it either. So by removing the interference, it allows suddenly people access their intuition. I've had clients ring me up and go, "It's amazing, I'm driving to work and I know which car's going left and which one's going right way before they indicate or start braking, you know, and change lanes." And he says, "It just all flows. My life just flows. It's great." And this is just through them, you know, having the static removed that's blocking their intuition, that's, you know, interfering with it.
Do you recall having the technique done to you? Do you know what was done to you specifically?
No, sometimes people will block, and we couldn't get, like, the technique that was shown where it was actually like watching a possession, an exorcism done, like, you know, a lot of people have seen the movie Exorcist. It's a lot like that, where we'd commanded to come up through the body and speak to us and to agree to leave and that. But sometimes some people just wouldn't, because of their own belief system, wouldn't allow their voice box to be used, or they didn't know the mental techniques to be allowed something else to take over their voice, or were scared and just didn't want to, or didn't believe that there was anything there to start with that was going to. In these cases, we just go in with the muscle testing and test and get it to agree through the muscle, yes or no, to leave. We actually do it a different way now. We found it wasn't very empowering, or wasn't empowering enough for the client doing it that way. So we decided we'd change it around so that we'd give their higher self a list of instructions and ask if it agreed to these instructions. And the instructions were just basically around removing any interference, removing any equipment, reorganising the energy field to the correct shape, reconnecting all the energy bodies with each other in case there's a bit of a disruption between the mental body and emotional bodies, and a whole range of things like this that would empower the person and connect the person with themselves, closing all their chakras. You know, New Age movement teaches everyone to open their chakras, you know, open your crown chakra and open this and open that. As I said, everything's within, so you didn't need to open any energy fields. Everything's within, therefore the energy field's supposed to be sealed shut, because everything was within us. There's nothing outside of us. I even had one client that I'd treated, and then I seen her a couple of weeks later, and she had stuff going on, and I was aware as soon as I seen her that she had something going on, and she was too, fortunately. So she said, you got 5 minutes, let's have a quick session. So, and all it was a very simple meditation where you imagine a red rose in your aura, and the red rose absorbing all the negativity in your aura, and then you push the red rose out into the universe. What happens, though, to mentally, the image of pushing the red rose out of your energy field means you're opening your energy field. As soon as she did that, she got implants in the heart area. Okay, so, and that's what was triggering her, because I said, oh, hi, how you going? Immediately she crossed her arms, which was unusual for her, and the body language itself was like she was shutting off from me. I said, you okay? And she says, no, I don't, there's something going on, let's go check it out. And because she was another practitioner, she was giving me feedback as we were doing the work on what was going on. And she was going through a whole range of emotions, like fear. Now, I've known this lady for probably 6 years. She was one of my instructors in some of the kinesiology styles. So she was going through fear and hate, and they were just trying every emotion so that she would get up off the table and leave before I actually did anything to her, to remove it. So we went in and removed it, and she was fine. And I'm happy to say this lady sent me her 2 daughters to work on as well, a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old daughter who were both having issues going on in their life. One of them didn't really go out. She liked dancing and stuff, but she didn't go out. And when she did, she didn't dance and stuff. I did a session with her, I think it was a Thursday around lunchtime. I got reports back a couple of days later. She'd been out dancing Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night and Sunday. And like she just went out and started living her life and having fun. And she started losing weight, whether that's because, the exercise of dancing or because she was letting go of stuff, doesn't really matter. I mean, as long as she was, getting results she wanted, it didn't really matter why she was getting them.
So how do you push the negative energy out without opening your fields?
Well, you don't. Everything within you is you. So it's not a case of pushing anything out. If you've already been cleared of all the equipment and stuff and your energy field's sealed, then you just keep it sealed.
So it's a matter of being cleared and then sealed, and that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Shay, thank you so much for everything you've had to share with us today. If people want to contact you and talk to you about what you've said, is there a way that they can do that? Yeah,
sure. I have an email address at yahoo.com. If you'd like to send an email to mirrorchange@yahoo.com, I'd be happy to answer anyone's questions.
That's wonderful of you, because I know that so many people out there would get such relief from knowing that there is an answer to changing their way of life, their depressions, their addictions, their struggles that they have from day to day. It's so wonderful to know that there is something you can do about those things. Shay, thank you so much.
Thanks very much for the interview. I'm sure this has probably brought up far more questions than I've provided answers for. I'm happy that I can give someone my email address and maybe answer some questions that people may have.
I think it's wonderful, and hopefully we can talk some more.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thanks, Shay.
Thank you.
This Imaginites presentation is copyright 2003 to Imaginites. Numerous audiobook titles, as well as motion pictures, soundtracks and film and music production utilities are available from the Imaginites website at www.imaginites.com, or you can contact Imaginites at Australia 618 9324 4455, or by emailing Imaginites at the following address.